Student housing is such a unique industry. The more unique an industry is, the more important it is for that industry to have a resource and a platform to share ideas and data, to determine best practices, and a platform to simply promote networking among the professionals in that industry. That's what we are setting out to provide with Student Housing Insight. But what's even more unique about the student housing industry is how unique those professionals are. They want to make a positive impact on the students and the university communities they serve. They understand they have an opportunity to touch the future. They come to work every day looking for ways to make that future bright. If you're one of those people, come be a part of Student Housing Insight. All right, welcome to Shop Talk for November 2023. If you would, please, we're on a different platform this month, obviously. I'll go through a couple of housekeeping things with that. But if you will, in the comments, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to kind of see what's happening with where everyone is tuning in from. Let me get a couple of things out of the way really quick as it relates to the housekeeping. One, for chatting. It's over in the right-hand corner, down at the bottom. And then if you want to ask a question, this is a little bit different from what we've done in the past because we've had a separate area for questions. Put a Q in front of it. That way I can easily identify it in the chat. Fantastic. Looks like we've got folks from Clemson, College Station. Fantastic. Let me find Dave, and we'll go ahead and get started with our Dave, are you there?
I am here.
I'm here. I don't see your camera, but I hear you.
You don't see my camera, do you? What is going on? Worked fine yesterday. Let me see if I can. There we go.
Perfect. Well,
right.
I know you spent a lot of time in Las Vegas for the past few weeks. How are you doing?
Wow. I texted my wife on the flight home from OpTech and said, Las Vegas twice in 2 weeks is enough for me. So it was great, but I'm glad to be honestly back in the office for a little while at least. And there's just a lot going down in Washington right now, so we have our hands full.
Yeah, well, I'd love to get a. I know you've got this on the first bullet here, but would love to get a wrap up of the both OpTech as well as the Student Housing Conference.
Well, I'll start with both of them from a pure registration perspective. They both were record setting for us, and so that certainly was a affirmation of the networking opportunities that everybody can get, and the content of what we put together for both of those were really welcomed by the industry. There's a very different buzz, right? The Student Housing Conference, while there was a lot of people there, didn't always feel like a lot of people because everybody was talking about deals. So they're not necessarily in panels. OpTech, in comparison, they're not really doing deals. And so they're actually spending time learning and networking. And so it's a very different vibe, but it was really, I think, a great outcome for the people who attended. And if you got to attend both, then you really got some great opportunities to hear a lot of great panels, do some great networking, and hopefully got to see the Sphere in Las Vegas, or got to go watch U2, which a lot of people did, or play Top Golf. So as much as we can complain about going to Vegas, there's always something fun to do there.
Yeah, I had a great time, and I think it's one of the best student housing conferences that there is. So next year, going to be in Vegas again.
We are across the street at the Aria next year, so we're looking forward to that. OpTech, in comparison, is here in DC. We've done that before, and so that's a great venue here in DC. And then we don't know where we're going to be the year after that. I think we're having a little trouble finding space in Vegas, so if people have suggestions, we're all ears. If you want to go somewhere different or have something in mind that you think people would want to go to, send us an email. Let us know. We're all ears right now. So we're good for next year, but the years after that, my meetings team is saying they're having trouble finding space in Vegas, which is kind of an odd thing, but I think everybody's going there right now.
Well, let's just stay away from hurricane areas in September.
That's very true.
That's the only thing I ask.
Well,
Speaking
I'm
of
trying
which,
not to get there when Formula One is there. I think the people from Formula One just issued an apology to everybody because of the disruption that it did to Las Vegas for an extended period of time.
right. Well, Joe said Atlanta, so see what your folks can do with that.
All
Well,
right.
hey, speaking of hurricanes, you've got some things with insurance I know you want to talk about.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about something that's not a bullet point. And you guys are hearing this because it just hit the wire 6 minutes ago. We always get an embargoed release, but FHFA is the regulator. Fannie and Freddie just released the purchase caps for 2024, and the announcement just came out 5 minutes ago. So you guys are hearing it as soon as anybody else is actually hearing it. And this year, the purchase caps for each one of the for Fannie and Freddie were $75 billion each. We're not coming close to that this year at all. They are going to ratchet it down, but only slightly to $70 billion. It's still a recognition that they think the overall market is still going to be smaller. Interest rates will stay elevated, so it's going to have somewhat of a constraint on some of the other refi transactional activity that we've seen in the past. Not great news. I know people don't want to hear that, but that's unfortunate. But that is the outcome. One of the other interesting things, and I don't have all the details, and one other element they're very supportive of workforce housing, which doesn't necessarily fit within student housing, but where it could benefit is that things done through workforce housing and the programs that Fannie and Freddie have there are going to be exempted from that $70 billion cap. So what it does is it gives the enterprises more room to lend, and certainly could benefit student housing. So just want to insert that in there, given that it's literally hot off the press and its announcement just came out. But speaking of some other issues, OpTech, this was clearly something we talked about there. I think everybody on this phone has been dealing with insurance issues. Clearly the costs and access to that. We have worked across a couple of trade organizations and others, and then also with members of Congress and looking at ways to figure out how to address the challenges in the insurance industry at the moment. And there's no silver bullet here right now. It's raising the level of awareness. We are talking to Congress potentially about some type of backstop for physical plant issues, and so we're hoping to make some progress. But as you can imagine, this thing move rather slowly, and the willingness of Congress to pass any legislation right now, given the difficulties going on in the House at the moment, and the fact they have to pass appropriations bills before they can do anything else, it means that we're going to have to wait.
Gotcha.
The other one, which we were happy to see, our bank regulators, after working on updating the Community Reinvestment Act for a number of years now, issued a final rule. And for the industry in general, it was a positive outcome. Again, kind of gives the banks a more clear-cut direction which way to go. For anybody who has a property that happens to be in a low to moderate income neighborhood, and I know that there are certainly some universities that are in those areas, that could be beneficial for accessing bank loans as well. So I would encourage people to take a look at that. Speaking of FHFA and banks, they published a report after a year-long review of the role of the federal home loan banks. And we actually encourage them to look more at our industry and look at ways to increase banks' interaction with the federal home loan banks, and ways to promote the multifamily and student housing industry. So there was it was certainly noted in this report, and there's a lot more to be done here. There's going to be a lot of rulemaking and other things that will come out, but at least it was an acknowledgement that that bank part of the banking system could do more. So again, positive for the overall industry in terms of access to capital. If you didn't hear discussions about artificial intelligence at OpTech, maybe weren't in what were many panels talking about this. And there's an awful lot, I think, going to be impacting the student housing industry, going to be impacting the multifamily industry. Everybody is looking at AI and how that could be impactful to their businesses. There's too much going on right now to really put your hands around. However, something like this gets really hot, like it is right now, and Congress starts to get worried. And right now they are exploring, their hearings going on, there's studies going on, there's just a lot of unknown outcomes for Congress, but what they like to do is regulate. So we do have a little bit of a concern about imposing regulations on an industry, if I want to call AI an industry, that's evolving. We don't, ask the average person, AI means a lot to a lot of different people, but stay tuned on that one. I hate saying it, but I really have some level of concern that Congress may put some harness on this that we really don't want to have happen. So speaking of Congress, my colleague Matthew Berger and our last month talked briefly about taxes, and where we focused that conversation was in 2017 when they passed the Jobs and Tax Cut Act, that a lot of those existing rules expire in 2025. And given that we're only a month and a half away from 24, all of a sudden, that they're going to start looking at things that may expire. But again, not knowing who's going to be in office and who's going to control House and Senate, we'll see what happens. But from a year-end tax bill, there are some things that need to get done that we have some level of concern, and so we're hoping to get something done there. But again, given the fact that Congress still hasn't passed how to fund itself for the next year, tax bill chances are unfortunately decreased a little bit. Another one that
I know this next one everybody's going to get interested in.
Yeah, I know. So there's a lot of conversations at OpTech, at Student Housing Conference, and I actually hate writing down the word junk fee because this has just been painted as a broad brush by the administration. The FTC is all over this, and so they have proposed a rule regarding junk fee. Where this is going to end up, we don't know. As you can imagine, we will respond to this proposed rule, both individually as an organization, but also we work a lot with the other trade organizations as well. And this raises, again, a high specter of concern that the fees that we encounter in operating our businesses are not made up. And whether it just says they're going to all be lumped in or they have to be disclosed differently, we don't know all of that. But the worst thing to do would be if any of these quote unquote junk fees get outright outlawed or highly regulated. So stay tuned on this one. You'll hear more about this from us as we go along, and we certainly will update everybody on this webinar as we...
The proposal that they put out, can we find that at the FTC website or?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect.
Again, it's just something that they are on the warpath of executing on this. And again, the administration was came out with this as well. And so we should expect more of this. There's some things on here which I didn't even include that the administration is doing about making a big issuance on adaptive reuse, which I know a couple of people in the student housing industry have done that as well. But wanted to acknowledge time and for the next speakers. The one last thing I'm going to mention, and again, when I mentioned the House appropriations bill, and while that's really gets into the weeds, one of the elements that is part of that is the National Flood Insurance Program. And again, we are fully aware that both multifamily and student housing are reliant on this program for properties that are in floodplains and may have difficult access for flood insurance. And so this program, we would love to get a multi-year approval, but we just, for whatever reason, Congress just can't do that. And they kind of reapprove it 1 year, 2 years. Right now, November 17th, which is the end of this week, the National Flood Insurance Program will be suspended unless they can pass the appropriations, including the NFIP. So we're asking them to kind of carve this out of what may be the short-term solution for funding and make it a long-term, and at least go out 1 year. So stay tuned on that one. And again, it's a program that we know that people use. So a lot going on. There's other things I didn't even cover that we are working on today that also impact the industry. But wanted to give you a quick update to let you know all the stuff that we're working on.
Oh, great. Well, thanks, David. Matt Pavlik had a suggestion for you for the next conference. And hey, they got the GOP debate for next month, so why not? Let's head to Tuscaloosa.
All right, Matt. As long as you can get us in a game.
Well, Dave, thanks so much. I'm going to bring Rich up really quick from France Media and Interface to talk a little bit about industry event that's coming up next month in my neck of the woods here in Charlotte. Right. And that's LeaseCon+TurnCon.
See you next month.
Thanks, Wes. Dave, by the way, if you're still listening, awesome event in Vegas. Great to see you, and you guys did an amazing job.
Likewise. Take care, Rich.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, Rich, I know you've got a lot of you've been really, really busy with a lot of different things over the past month. But I know specifically with LeaseCon+TurnCon, getting all the panels set up and everything. Give us an update.
Will do. We have been busy, and we're getting kind of the creme de la creme of the owners and operators in the industry who will be speaking at LeaseCon. We've got folks from Cardinal, Scion, Asset Living, Redstone, PeakMade, Landmark, GMH Core Spaces, Tailwind, Dinnerstein, Varsity Campus, Pierce Education Properties, Article Student Living, University Partners, Book and Ladder, and XFD. So we have a great lineup of owner-operators. We're having a really cool, I'm looking forward to, keynote from Peter Lynch from the Cardinal Group. He's their Chief People Officer, also a renowned public speaker. And it's an interesting title of his talk. It's The Future of Work. We is greater than me, which with the way society's evolved and the Great Resignation and all that, I think that's a very interesting topic. So I'm looking forward to hearing him. And also we're going to hear from the College Student Mental Wellness and Advocacy Coalition, Richie Lasik, who his daytime job is with Core Spaces, but he is on the board at the coalition. So he'll be doing a talk on Monday afternoon. So we've got a lot of good stuff going on.
Well, fantastic. And if someone hasn't registered yet, what's the best way for them to get information on that?
Go to interfaceconferencegroup.com and you'll see a bunch of our events listed across France Media, all different kinds of property types, but just click on LeaseCon. You could also see ads we're running on studenthousingbusiness.com or our weekly e-newsletter, or you could always just reach out to me and I'll get you some information.
Well, great. Well, hey, I'm going to start bringing Charlie and the College House panel on, but really quick, how are things looking for the big conference in Austin this spring? Any announcements yet for that?
Yeah, we have a date, April 24 through 26. We'll be at the JW, and already getting a lot of folks inquiring about it. So I think it will be another, hopefully record-setting event. I think it'll be an interesting time for where the industry is at that point. Hopefully, the dam will have broken a little bit on investment transactions, development opportunities, financing. I guess obviously that remains to be seen, but the strength of our industry hopefully will mean that we'll come back quicker than maybe some of the other asset classes. So should be great, and we look forward to seeing everybody in Charlotte in a couple of weeks, December 4th and 5th.
Well, fantastic, Rich. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity, Wes. See you soon.
All right, take care. All right, well, let's start moving over to our College House Panel, we've got a fantastic lineup today, and I think I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Carly, I think we're starting with you, right?
Yeah. Hey, I am Carly Shepard. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Student Quarters. Student Quarters is based out of Atlanta. I am based out of Tallahassee, Florida. Excited to talk with you guys all today.
Thank you guys for having me. My name is Daniel Benoit. I'm one of the client services managers at Graystar. Been in student housing for about 12 years, and this is my first Shop Talk, so very excited to be on. Thanks for having me.
Hey there, I'm Jordan Bardabedian. I've been in student housing for 16 years, and I currently serve as the Director of New Development for Article Student Living. For those of you who don't know, QuadReal recently acquired CA Student Living, and under this new ownership, our organization will now operate as Article. So this is really exciting for us. Marks a significant step forward in our efforts to seize new opportunities in the student housing space. And thanks for having me on, Wes and Charlie. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Jordan, I think the last time you were on here, or since the last time you were on here, you've got a baby in the house now.
I do, and
Congrats.
she's 7 months. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. Well, Charlie, this is the time of the segment where you bring us all up to date on how well UGA is doing and football.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get that over with.
Yeah, we won't talk about the 52-17 win this weekend versus Ole Miss, but I wasn't going to bring it up, but you did. But no, excited to chat through with this great panel. I know a handful of familiar faces there. But as we look at the information, again, all of this data is as of Friday the 10th. So, 4 days ago, and covers roughly about, I think 260 of the 280 markets we're covering. There's still a handful of small markets on the western side of the world that have yet to start. But I think I really like doing these more and more, Wes, just because I have good news to say.
Let's go.
I've spoken with a lot of people, whether you're in office or others, and you don't get to talk about outperformance. You don't get to talk about rent growth. You do get to talk about the 10-year being evil, but other than that, we're unique in our conversations here as we look at performance, and that's a testament to those on the call here as well as those listening in. But as we look at pre-leasing velocity, we're still ahead, roughly about 2%. So 180 basis points across the board. And what's interesting, really, as we dive into this information, is that coupled with the rent growth still above 10%. I know we'll get to that slide here in a moment. It's still a strong operating environment. The fundamentals are incredible. But don't take it from me. I'd love to give some insight for those that live and breathe it every day. I look at the numbers. I talk to you, but again, it's better to hear it from those who are physically doing it a day to day. And Carly, I'm gonna start with you. Thanks for joining us today. What's going on over at SQ? Give me some thoughts on how the first, I guess, 2+ months of the leasing cycle have kicked off, and what are the teachings from last year that you're taking into this year that's based on our pre-call showing some strong performance for the portfolio.
Yeah. Leasing is hot and heavy. We are right in line with the market overall that's showing in College House and a little bit ahead of where we were year over year. We started out of the gate at a lot of sites like move-in day, the week after move-in day, and got out of the gates really quick. I think lessons learned from that last year to this year is more of like a tailored renewal approach. So more tailored renewal offers, more one-on-one conversations versus just a blanket, like, here's your renewal offer. Don't you love us already, and sign. So that's one of our lessons learned from last year to this year. And then trying to, in some specific markets, like Clemson, for example, is one that's always been hot and heavy for us, but slow it down a little bit. Be really focused on the rate growth and specific unit features and bed space features, and kind of tailor our offers there. But overall, we're trending in line a little bit ahead of last year, which is great for us at Student Quarters. We got some really hot markets. Clemson is hot for us still. College Station is hot. Our property in Indianapolis is doing really good, and they're trending about 10% ahead year over year. So overall, it's been a really great start for us.
That's awesome. It's kind of counterintuitive to slow down the leasing, but I feel like just with how hot out the gate the industry was just leasing velocity in general last year, there were some misses on some of that rent growth. Jordan, I know with I think 6, technically 7 deliveries last year with Article. It's going to take me a minute to get that.
Yeah.
So just bear with me. What's the approach look like this year? I know with, Quad's been a partner of y'all's for a while and they're very supportive, same people, but what's the MO, currently with, and again, from the new dev perspective, but also some of those Class A assets, the West Lafayette's of the world, where I would imagine similar sentiment as Carly said of got to slow some leasing down. I think I saw your deal was 40% behind, where the reason why it is because it was full this time last year. So give me some thoughts on what's going on at Article.
Yeah, so Article's portfolio has seen the same pre-leasing trend as the industry as a whole at 31%. Like you said, we delivered a lot of new assets this past year, which was roughly 3,100 beds. We're actually slated to deliver 2 new projects in 2024. But, in looking at, this year and really what we're doing to drive that velocity that we saw last year is, just really continuing to do what we do best, which is, making sure that we're setting our rates and, putting together a strategy that's based on really what we saw with the popularity of floor plans last year, but also being mindful of the exposure that we have in those floor plans at each asset. So one thing that we saw in our lease ups last year was that our 4 bedrooms were really fast to lease out of the gate. We're seeing that trend continue this year. But one thing to note is that in Austin, we're actually seeing our studios in 6 bedrooms do better than they did last year in terms of leasing velocity. So it's interesting to see, how things are going to shake out. But, with 3 of our deliveries last year exceeding pro forma on rates, and, our portfolio trending above that 5% rate growth right now, we're anticipating a great year for this year as well.
Yeah, and especially with some of those markets where I think even in Austin, you still have some pipeline that's coming in this year.
Sure do.
Better understanding. Again, now that you get the shiny new asset in the market, I would imagine, the sale. I wouldn't say the sale, but the transaction there is a little more. Hey, look how beautiful this project is, and you're able to take that into account as it relates to, again, the strategy and the business plan that your teams are executing. Mr. Benoit, what is the notion over at Greystar? I know with, again, I can just look on LinkedIn and see that things are going pretty well. But, I know there's been some takeovers and some wins on that front. What's the approach going into, these first couple months with leasing, as well as kind of that client communication?
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of what Jordan and Carly already said, but historically we're seeing we're a little bit ahead of year-over-year leasing records right now. But I think the most important factor is that our rental rate growth is far exceeding what we were expecting and what we saw previously. So I think as long as we can keep the rental velocity or the leasing velocity, consistent, then I think we're going to be able to capture those higher rental rate growths, with I know a lot of our clients are mostly focused on, as opposed to leasing up early. So, from that side, it's great. But I think at the same time, we have to temper expectations with some clients who are entering different markets. Every market is extremely different in student housing. You could be just right up the road in Austin, Texas, and be vastly different than, College Station in some areas. So I think it's all about communication and making sure that when we enter in an opportunity, like a transition, like we're currently experiencing on third party, it's really just making sure that we over communicate with our clients. We lay out the expectations from day one, and we just make sure we follow through with those expectations. Making sure we put up realistic goals and make sure our teams on site, they're able to knock them out of the park. That's really the best thing that we can do. But again, it's very positive. The growth is phenomenal, and we're excited for the next upcoming couple months to see that growth continue.
Yeah, definitely. And Wes just pulled up the rate growth side. Across the board, you're seeing again outsized growth. Still roughly about 10. Thank you for making me not have to do the math here. Roughly about 10.9% nationally. Again, this time last year we saw a little bit of a jump just as everyone kind of got their feet, I guess, wrapped their heads around the fact that they're 70% or 60% in this time, and there's some rate growth left on the table, for lack of a better word. I know, Carly, you mentioned on the renewal side, I'd like to kind of hone in a little bit about kind of the teachings from last year. I think in many markets, you saw that loss to lease, or the first rate signed versus the last rate, anywhere from, I don't know, $400, $500, $600 in some instances, right? How has that been, the communication been, especially with the residents? I know you said you took a tailored renewal approach this year. Walk me through how that's been going, good or bad, but how that's kind of playing into the overall performance that you're seeing over at SQ.
Yeah, we have some markets, like specifically like Fayetteville, Arkansas, for example. We started off really softer with our renewal rates last year, and that market kind of blew up, and we pushed and had a really, really great rate growth last year. But some of the people who signed early last year got a $699 rate, where now we're offering them $800, $815, $825 to renew. So we've just taken more of a tailored approach. Instead of offering everybody like tier one, it's more of like a 2-bedroom and bed space A with a larger closet and larger bathroom is a more desired floor plan. So maybe their rate is a little bit higher than bedroom B, who has a smaller closet or a shared bathroom in the hallway or something like that. So we've really done more tailored personal communication, one-on-one conversations and door knocks versus a mass blast of, renew at your same rate, or generating renewal offers in Entrata and just blasting them out. It's been more tailored one-on-one conversations versus mass communications to everyone. And a more tailored approach, like I said, on their specific bed space, amenity premiums that they may or may not have.
Yeah. And it's again, like looking backwards, right? Letting it to go back to the market used to not be a good thing, right? And I think especially with the way that leasing just took off last year and this year too, more tailored approaches, and it really dives into that the resident experience side, right? Where again, I know college kids probably not the easiest to deal with, but at the same time, with the premiums that are charging, I think there's a premium offering that needs to happen from a resident experience side. I know, Jordan, we talked about this a little bit on the pre-call. Again, I know you're in Chicago and you can't be at every single asset, even though you want to. How's that communication with the site teams going? I know they're on the ground, and it might not be the easiest conversation with someone saying, hey, instead of the $699 you're paying, it's closer to $800. In some instances, probably maybe a little different. Talk to me through how you're communicating with the site teams and keeping that resident experience top of mind.
Yeah. So just to echo some of the things that Carly was saying, I mean, we really did, go into the renewal season with less of a sales message and more of an opportunity to grow with us for another year, right? So, that was actualized in more of like letter form to our residents. We were really transparent about our floor plans, the availability, like our preferred rates, and what their opportunity was and what that time frame was for them to be able to continue staying with us for next year. In terms of our communication with our teams, our site teams, right, is just that, a lot of our property managers and leasing managers, I mean, they really have a lot of autonomy, and that translates into them really having a lot of pride in, being able to see their property do so well in terms of not only velocity, but also in growing the rents at their asset. And I think that that's something that we do really well, is instill that feeling of, hey, this is your property, and you should be excited as they are to really see the growth that they're really managing, right? So I think that it went over really well, and sure, there is some sticker shock, right, with deltas of $200+ but I think that when you deliver a great product and you keep it up, I think, people recognize that and are willing to stay.
Love that. And Daniel, I know with the Greystar portfolio as large as it is, communication is paramount, especially not just externally to the clients you're speaking with, but also internally. Walk me through how that's been going on your end. Again, I know the massive footprint that's out there. It's probably a little bit lost in translation, but based on our pre-call, it seems like you guys are doing it effectively and ensuring that, the teams have the tools they need.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Jordan kind of touched base on it, but like that buy-in for the site level is critical for the success of the asset, and especially with the relationship with any external client. And so we really do our best to try to empower the on-site teams and kind of give them a peek behind the curtain on why certain things are practices, whether that's rental rate growth or trying to be more efficient with expense spending. So I think there's a lot of it when you empower the on-site teams and you really focus on that development so they understand the why. I think you really start to see it pay dividends on the results side. And then more importantly, when it comes to the client communication, I think having them kind of get a peek behind the curtain with the on-site team, why they're recommending certain specials, promotions, events, or just experiences for residents, I think that really puts them in a good position to see there's a method to all the proposals that we're putting together or the plans that we're doing, because it's very easy for someone that's completely removed from the on-site situation to look at something and just say like, hey, like we don't need to spend that kind of money or we don't need to put that effort into it. But when they understand the why and they see the effort behind it, I think that really, again, it pays dividends down the road. And kind of like what Carly said earlier too, like the move-in experience has been one of the most critical aspects that we focus on at Greystar. And we talked about leasing being consistently higher year over year this time frame. It's also starting a lot earlier. I mean, you have your Power 5 markets like Austin, Texas, that obviously are leasing months before the kids even move in for the following year. But you have these markets that historically have been like a late fall, early spring, kind of really kicking off leasing. We're starting to see the proactiveness from residents kick off a lot earlier. And so we have to combat that and make sure that we're in a position to succeed from day one with that good positive move-in experience, because I mean, it can totally crush a property's leasing efforts down the line if you don't start off well. So yeah, there's a lot of things you have to get right, I guess. But again, that's where that communication comes really in hand.
Definitely. No, and it's funny. As we look at the information here, right? And I think, again, rental rates are up, but if you look at the larger unit types versus the smaller ones, and a lot of this we covered, when we spoke yesterday, but as we look at the velocity, and I know Carl, I think Jordan mentioned, in Austin, for example, they had some different floor plans reacting a different way. Based on what you're seeing in this early velocity, Jordan, we'll start with you. Do you see any pushback on price as it relates to individual floor plans, where if we look at the rent growth versus the velocity, your 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s are all outsized from a growth or from a velocity standpoint, where you can see here on the rent growth perspective, you're I guess single digit growth. I guess that's almost narcissistic of us, but on the studios and ones versus your larger unit types. Is there any trends you're seeing kind of here in the early stages that you may not have seen in years past?
Yeah, one of the things that I feel like is happening across the board, which is pretty rare, right? Because the board is all over the place, but is studios that are leasing. Typically I feel like we see them either lease up because there's so few of them at a property, or they're the last to lease. And now, like I said, across the board from Boise to Texas, we're seeing these studios lease up fairly slowly, but through the entire span of the lease up. So, I think in terms of what we're seeing as far as rates, it's likely that, studios and ones have maybe been capped out for a few years now. And we're seeing the opportunity with the 6 bedrooms because the popularity is on the rise for those. And again, we're seeing that in Austin. There's opportunity for that floor plan to grow. But those are just a few things that we're seeing in our portfolio.
Definitely. And Carly, I know we talked about this, talking West Coast, really. To Daniel's point, things seem to be starting earlier and earlier. Any trends with a handful of those West Coast assets that you're seeing that's a little out of the norm from years past?
Yeah, absolutely. Our property in Sacramento is, typically that is a very late market and leases up really through the summer, but they're trending over 5% ahead of last year, with more people coming and looking in groups to be in our 4 bedrooms that we offer there. We have a handful of studios and 1 bedrooms too, but people coming in droves wanting the 4 bedrooms early in the market. Like, they really dictated when we kicked off leasing there this year. In Sacramento versus us having like a big kickoff. We had such a list of people that were ready to sign. We're like, well, heck, we might as well do it now in September versus waiting until our, I think there we had like an October 15th original date. So seeing a lot more traction there, which is good and hopeful for us for our West Coast asset, as well as we have a site in Colorado Springs as well. And that's more studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, smaller unit types, but still seeing really great early velocity there at that property.
Yeah. Daniel, to you, are you seeing anything similarly? I know there's a handful of new developments that are coming. I don't know if they've launched yet, but there's still a pretty large footprint there on the West Coast at Greystar. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is well, first off, I hope next year we can see some stats for the 10 by 10 units. So make sure we add that to this chart. But besides that, I mean, we've seen and I'm sure it's a result of COVID, but we're seeing more often than not people coming in for those larger units, which I think attributes to the success of the 4s and 5s. We see them coming in with a full group of like roommates ready to go. So we saw less roommate matching this past year during the move-in process. And I think we're seeing that trend continue where residents are just accustomed to coming in with their full group of 4, or full group of 3 or 5, whatever it is. And they're filling those units up a lot quicker than I think we've seen in years past. And the only thing I would say with that too is same thing on the West Coast. I think we're seeing, where double occupancy usually is a very prominent floor plan, we're seeing an increased demand for private options in some markets. And I think that even within a higher price point, students really value that privacy, even in a traditionally dominated market by those double occupancies. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as you look at just, for lack of a better word, what we've seen is a slowdown from a data perspective on those larger unit or the smaller unit types. I think there's some hesitancy on the price there, but again, I think 450,000 of the beds we're tracking are 4 bedrooms, where it saves money, it saves times, it saves your leasing teams the headache of trying to the roommate match, where you're still able to push that price, and again, the students live with their friends. As we shift gears a little bit over onto the new development side, I know this last year, I think we tracked a little under 40,000 beds are delivered. This year, there's about 34,000. I mean, historically, you're still down 20,000 beds from kind of the average you saw in 18, 17 and previously. Jordan, from a new development perspective, how has, I guess the last 2 years really changed the mindset as you're looking at whether it's a lease up or planning your leasing efforts for a new development? I don't think it's as much in 18 months, shovel in the ground, lease up, you get your CO. I think it's a little more challenging, but I'd love to get some perspective just because I know there's a lot of people on this call and in the industry that are definitely interested in seeing or hearing from you about the new development side.
Yeah, I think that over the last 2 years, as it pertains to the new dev lease ups, and of course, it's going to depend on where you are in the country, but it's so critical to build your base as early as the summer. And what I mean by that is you can't really just come out of the gate signing leases anymore. I think students really need to learn your brand. You have to get the trust of the students in your market, and then they'll be ready to take the leap. So when you're thinking about what's so critical for a lease up to be successful, it's going to be getting on the ground early, even earlier than we've seen in years past, in order to establish like that brand awareness, that recognition, and build the trust with the students you're trying to lease with. Because again, I think gone are the days where even in markets like Gainesville, right, where you could put up a leasing office and sign your first lease in 3 days later. And it just doesn't happen anymore like that. And again, I think it's really about building your brand, building the trust with the students on the campus and in the community. And then you'll see that lease up really do well. And quite frankly, it's what we saw in Austin, right? Get there. We got there the spring before. And while that's a very early market, I think that's the tempo that honestly you have to have in these markets really across the country now.
Definitely. And it helps play into year 2, right? And I think that's kind of the big thing. You delivered on what you said. So that's awesome. I know Wes is pulling me off stage because I know he's got a couple other people, but we could probably talk for hours. Wes, I'm going to turn it back to you, to Jordan, Carly, and Daniel. Always a pleasure. And thanks so much for for lending your thoughts and expertise here.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. This has been a great panel, and looking forward to seeing how things end up for you guys.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for having
guys.
us.
Thank you.
Guys, I'm bringing Chris Bruin from NMHC up. Last month at the conference in Vegas, NMHC put out their, I think it comes out every 2 years now, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but the benchmarking survey for student housing income and expenses. And although I missed the segment that you were presenting it on, I did pick up the pamphlet that you guys gave out, and just, there wasn't a whole lot of surprises in some of the data, but I did feel like the highlights were something that we needed to go over on Shop Talk. So with that being said, I'll let you introduce yourself, Chris.
All right, thanks a lot, and thanks for having me, Wes. I'm Chris Bruin. I'm Senior Director of Research at NMHC. And so, as Wes mentioned, the 2023 Student Housing Income and Expense Benchmarking Survey Report is now out. This is a survey that we've been conducting since 2010, and that we now undertake every 2 years. For this year's survey, we collected income and expense statements from 24 unique student housing providers, containing data from over 1,000 properties and over 566,000 beds, making this the largest sample to date. And you could pause with the slides now.
Okay.
It's got a few introductory remarks here. So how this works is we collect the income and expense statements from companies, and then from them we generate a number of summary statistics for key line items. For instance, on gross potential rent, vacancies, concessions, taxes, insurance. And for each one, we calculate the 10th percentile, median, 90th percentile, and average for the 2022 calendar year. We are also able to match 416 properties that were present in both this year's sample and the one from 2 years ago, to generate summary statistics for 2-year changes on another number of items.
So I got one question to ask about that, Chris. How hard was it putting, because I know Julie Bonnie brought this up on the operations panel that she was on. And one of the biggest things with being able to compare is everyone's line items are so different, and that just really hasn't been standardized. How hard was that for you guys?
We do the best we can here, and sometimes it's obvious where companies are doing things differently.
Yeah.
Based on how they report things. We have like certain internal notes that like this line item should include these subcomponents and not include these subcomponents. So we take care to like include them and exclude them when necessary. And we look for, if there's a company where like certain items are like much larger or smaller than every other company, like we'll look into that.
Yeah.
But it's not perfect either. Like we don't really talk to each company to ask them exactly what they're including, and we kind of we take their word on if they're listing concessions, we're not going to grill them on what's really contained in that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can only do so much. I'd love to get that kind of those recommendations that you guys have made, and maybe we can, get that out to everybody in the industry, and maybe over the next couple of years before the next one comes out, we can get that a little bit more streamlined. But anyway,
yeah.
Let me know if I need to move on to the next slide.
Sure. Where are we on the slides? Yeah. Perfect. So what I want to do is I want to go over the Excel format of the product itself, the sample composition, along with some key findings that I found in my analysis. So the Excel format. So if you purchase the survey, you do get a PDF report with information about the data, the sample, a little bit of our analysis, but the core of the product consists of two Excel sheets, and you can kind of see from the screenshot how this works. Each tab in the Excel sheet contains summary statistics for a different line item, and you can see concessions selected here. And so you have summary statistics both as a percentage of rent and in dollars per bed for a number of categories: by year built, by size of property, by type of property, distance from campus. And we present statistics for every combination of category and geography for which we have at least, we have responses from at least 5 companies. And you can see how you could select those geographies and categories. Same thing. So the second Excel sheet is the same thing, except for statistics on 2-year changes for a subset of the line items. But same thing. It's presented both as the percentage difference in dollars per bed and as the change in whatever the item is as a share of rent.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So getting back to this year's sample, again, this was our largest sample yet in terms of companies, properties, units, and beds, all of which saw an increase from 2 years ago. If you want to go to the next slide, yeah, those are just those stats on companies, beds, units, properties, all of which saw an increase. The sample spanned all regions, but had the largest representation from the Southeast, followed by the Mountain Southwest region. Garden and mid-rise properties were the most common in the sample, but we did have sufficient data on high-rises to generate statistics.
Gotcha. Okay.
If you want to go to the next slide, we had a good range in terms of the size of properties. Properties in our sample tended to be newer. If you look at that pie chart, only 14% were built prior to the year 2000. And also not shown here, the properties in our sample ranged from being immediately adjacent to campus to over 8 miles from campus. And again, that is a category. These are all categories that you can cut the data by.
Gotcha. Ready to move on to key findings?
Sure.
All right.
And so these are just, so I think the main thing I want to convey is that this is very much a product where, because of how it's set up, you can get the data yourself and look for what it is you're interested in. These are just a few things that I looked at and that I found. So the first one, looking at 2-year changes, I think perhaps not surprisingly, the last survey was conducted in 2021 for the 2020 calendar year during COVID. Since then, we've seen a decrease in vacancy and an increase in gross potential rent, combined, seeing an increase in net rental income as a share of gross potential rent. And this is just showing that profit margin here, the change in that net rental income as a percentage of gross potential rent increased, and most notably increased in the far west region.
Yeah, it's interesting. Ready to move on to the next one? Yeah.
So, and the rest, the other findings I'm presenting here are just for the 2022 calendar year. So we're looking at here vacancy as a percentage of gross potential rent, cut by both region and size of the property. Found that Smaller properties really tended to have lower vacancy costs.
Sure.
As did, it's kind of hard to, overall the Far West had a lower vacancy, but you can see that was really only true for those smaller properties, which kind of influenced the region overall.
Yeah.
This, perhaps not surprisingly, so cutting concessions by distance from campus. The further out you got from campus, the higher the concessions as a percentage of gross potential rent. And this was more pronounced in larger properties. That relationship between larger properties and concessions didn't really seem to exist among properties closer to campus.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's
So
not surprising, but it's interesting.
I don't want to read too much into that either,
Yeah.
but I think probably the distance from campus relationship is a little bit more linear and pronounced there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the stuff that's closer to campus in that situation, they're, that, you know, obviously they're going to be smaller, but I think a lot of those are still being managed kind of, you know, outside of, you know, some of the national players. So that may have something to do with those concessions as well.
Yeah. So the slide looking at operating expenses, these differences might not look that large, but I thought it was large enough to note that operating expenses tended to be lower in newer properties. Again, I don't know if this is really surprising.
Yeah.
I would expect older properties that kind of have more issues and
Sure.
just higher costs. And so we did find that it's nice when kind of data align with your expectations here.
It will be interesting to see as this, you know, continues to grow, especially after 2011. So post recession, you know, I felt like the quality of what, you know, developers were putting out was, you know, was much higher than a lot of the, you know, garden home, you know, stick type of construction that was happening. So it's going to be interesting to see that over the next few years to see how, you know, those newer ones, if they, you know, continue to, you know, have much lower expenses from that standpoint.
And by higher quality, meaning you would expect it to have lower expenses, or you would expect
Yeah, throughout
Yeah.
time, I think it's going to, you know, continue to show that the operating expenses are going to be much lower.
And this is something I hadn't looked at in the past, but I wanted to look at if there was any relationship between vacancy and expenditures on concessions and marketing. The idea being if you had higher vacancies, maybe you would offer higher concessions and spend more on marketing to try to offset those vacancies. And this is what we found. Seems like a pretty significant relationship here. That's vacancy expense as a percentage of gross potential rent on the x-axis there. As that increases, we see higher marketing expenses as a percentage of net rental income and higher concessions offered. Although that relationship with concessions is maybe a little less pronounced, and after the 5% mark, it kind of levels off.
Gotcha.
So I don't know how this aligns with what you would have expected. So I'm always curious to hear. Sometimes people look at the same charts that I make and have kind of a different interpretation of what's going on.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much what I would expected. It's interesting there in the middle between the 5 to 10%, but yeah, no, that I think pretty much checks out. Sure.
So yeah, I mean, I guess it's easy to look at this and say, yeah, this is all as expected, but you never really know until you look. I did actually look into, from our last conversation, you noted you were interested in gain loss to lease.
Yeah.
and how that might have changed over the past couple of years. And it looked pretty unexciting. The median for almost every category, median change was like 0. And one of the most valuable part of that 2-year change is that we are looking at same store changes. So to whatever degree we are missing differences in how companies might be reporting things, that's going to be canceled out by differencing over years. So not much exciting there, but there was much more going on, which is probably why I didn't present anything on that, but much more going on in terms of changes in vacancies, changes in rents over that 2-year period.
Well, hey, if folks in the audience are looking at this and they want to get their hands on that Excel sheet, this is something that they can obviously purchase from NMHC. Can you go over the pricing just a little bit on what that is?
Sure. It's $500 for members and $1,000 for non-members. It's free if you participate. So if you're an operator and are looking to participate in, being called into a meeting, but no, it's fine.
We're at the top.
It's free if you participate and submit your financials. But again, it's a very useful product if you want to see how your own financials measure up to those of the average or the median for a certain property type or within a certain geography. And that's really the intended purpose here.
That's a great budgeting tool. And, I can say, as a consultant, I've, used it quite a bit. And, when you're wanting to prove something to a client that doesn't have a lot of student housing experience, it's a fantastic report to be able to show them, hey, this is where we need to fall in, or this is what we should be expecting to fall in. So I'm glad you guys are doing this every other year, and look forward to the next one. Obviously, your email address is here, and then, of course, nmhc.org is the website. Any other notes of wisdom you want to pass along to the audience?
Not that I could think of. Just that was maybe a lot of information. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me or call me. If there's anything you think I should be looking at, I'd be happy to explore that in the data. So I welcome questions. And
we'll put the executive summary, that PDF, on the ShopTalk website for folks to download as well, if you want to take a look at that and take a little bit more time with it. Well, Chris, I was hoping to get some questions, but we're obviously beyond the top of the hour, so we'll let everybody go. Guys, the next ShopTalk is going to be on Thursday, December 12th. So just a little less than 4 weeks away. And just ask you, hey, if you enjoyed or got any value out of what we presented today, I ask that you just please share ShopTalk with your colleagues. Get more information at shoptalk.info and register to receive our monthly emails, letting everybody know when the meetings are going to be. So, Chris, thanks again. Rest of our panelists, thanks again. We'll see you next month.